juicer, and she wanted it, right? She was a huge health nut, way before anyone was healthy. And so, but it cost $1,500, and she could not afford that, so she said, okay, someday. But in between 63 and 93, as she was raising my brother and I, she was making us the grossest combinations of what, smoothies. It was whatever she was into at the time. Like, it tasted horrible. But we drank it because there was no other option, right? This is what we got. So fast forward to 1993, 30 years later, she still wants this Norwalk, only now it's $2,200. She still can't afford it. It's way out of her budget, but she says, oh my gosh, I don't want to go my whole life without this juicer. And so she does the all-American thing. She gets out her credit card, she buys the juicer, right? And to make herself feel better, she calls all of her neighbors and her friends, and she says, I want to use this incredible juicer. If you want juice, I want to make it for you. And that's how she began. No money is changing hands, okay? She's making the juice and she's giving it to her friends. Why? Because my mother is not motivated by money, totally motivated by wellness. That was her whole thing. So if she was making you healthier, that made her day. So about 6 months after she started doing this, a health food store opened in her neighborhood called Return to Eden, over near Terra Theater, and they heard about her, and they said, hey, come to the back of our store, we'll give you the produce, you make the juice, and we will split the sales. And she's thinking, oh my gosh, this is a home run, because I'm buying the produce and I'm giving the juice away, so this is great. So off she goes to the back of this health food store. Now, one thing to know about the Norwalk, it's about this big. It makes a gallon an hour, if you're lucky. Super labor intensive. So she recruits my brother and I to come help her because we're free labor. And maybe a month into this, my brother looks at my mom and he goes, Mom, there is no business on this little juicer. He said, if you want me to buy a real cold press, I will buy it at $6,000, but I want to be CEO. And my mother's like, be whatever you want to be out here, you know? So my brother buys this Good Nature X1, and he becomes CEO. Now, I am in school at the time. I had already graduated, but I wanted to go to med school, and so I was back in college taking all my sciences. So I had a lot of time to help them. And it's 1994. There's not a lot of people juicing. We're bottling in mason jars. We're writing the names on the top of the juices. Well, let's just put it this way. One person was getting paid, that was my mother, and it wasn't a lot, right? So as a last-ditch effort, we said to our mom, hey, go into Buckhead where people have money and try and sell this juice. And so our idea was like lawyers' offices or stock brokerage houses, but my mother doesn't think like normal people. And so she went to hair salons. And that decision literally turned our whole company around. Because hairstylists are stuck in their stations. They always like things that are new and trendy. They have cash from tips, and they have a new customer in their chair every time you go there. In 3 weeks, my mother was selling 3 times the amount we were selling in that health food store. So we quickly hired 3 guys. We created 4 routes. 2 were in Buckhead, 1 was in Sandy Springs, and 1 is in Virginia Highlands. And we were basically going to hair salons and selling juices in mason jars, in coolers, carrying baskets. And that's how we began. So 1995 comes around, we're selling way more outside of Return to Eden as we're selling in Return to Eden, and we needed our own space. And my brother lived in Virginia Highlands, and there was a space that had been available very close to his house for like 9 or 10 months. It was a Little Caesar's Pizza that had gone out of business. And so we went and met the landlord, and it was $2,500 rent. Like, that was like $1 million. You know, we were paying no rent at Return to Eden. And the guy was so desperate for anyone to rent the space, he said, look, I will give you no security deposit and a 30-day out, just take the space. And so what could the worst thing happen? We'd lose $2,500, right? So we took it, and we cleaned it, and we put our machines up inside this retail space, and our whole business plan is to manufacture in a retail space and send it out to hair salons. So that that's how we started. So one day, one thing about manufacturing is, I don't know what it's like here, but for us, we needed floor drains. So we would have tons of towels, because as you're hosing down machinery, you have to clean up. We'd have it underneath, and we had a single door like this, and 3 times a week we would be driving our box truck to the farmer's market at 6 in the morning, picking up all of our produce, bringing it back, unloading it through a single door like this. It was challenging. It was tough. So one day,
how many stores did you have?
No. That's and it wasn't a store. It was a storefront with people juicing in it. Okay, yeah. So one day, my brother and my mom got into the car and they drove down Monroe Drive to the Kroger at Ansley. And they got out of the car and they asked to speak to the manager, and the guy came out and they said, "Hey, we're juicing down the street. Can we sell our juices in your store?" And the guy was like, "Well, let me see your operation." So he literally got in his car and drove behind us back to the store, and he saw us juicing and bottling, and he said, "If you give me a cooler, I'll put it in my store." And so overnight, he sold a lot of juice. That was the #1 location of Kroger. There was no Whole Foods, no Publix. There was a Winn-Dixie, but Kroger was it in Atlanta. This was 1995. And he put that cooler in a really great location. So overnight, we were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to keep up with that one Kroger. And very quickly, we realized that we needed to find a manufacturing space, because we just could not do in a retail space. It just wouldn't work. And so my brother found a space over at 14th and Howell Mill. It was a shared space. There was a kosher distributorship that shared cooler and freezer with us, and there was a manufacturing space with floor drains, which was like angels singing in our world. And by the time that we opened that location, enough people in the neighborhood had walked by us juicing, and they would be like, "Hey, can we buy it here?" And we'd be like, "Sure." So we'd set up like a cooler. I mean, you guys have to understand, this space looked like a